السلام عليكم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونستجيره، فإنه حقا من هدى الله فلا مضل له، ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. اللهم يا رب صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى محمد النبي الأمين المرسل رحمة للعالمين، خاتم الرسل والأنبياء أجمعين، وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين، وعلى أصحابه المختارين، وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم إنا نسألك أن تقسم لنا من خشيتك ما يحول بيننا وبين معاصيك، وأن تقسم لنا من رحمتك ما يقربنا من طاعتك. ونسألك يا رب أن ترزقنا من اليقين ما يهون علينا مصائب الدنيا وأحداثها. Normally, I start out with a Quranic passage or a Quranic text or an ayah, and then I go about dissecting a set of events, applying the Quranic revelation upon the events analyzed. But recently, an event took place in Saudi that is profoundly telling on its own. It hardly needs commentary for it to combust with all types of meanings and connotations. A very telling event that in and of itself calls upon us to engage in deep reflection upon the state of Muslims and the situation, the moral situation that we find ourselves in. Recently, a well-known Saudi cleric named Ahmad al-Mubayyad managed to escape from Saudi, and upon arriving in Britain, escaping from oppression in Saudi, he sent out a message saying something to the effect, Alhamdulillah, thank God, I have safely managed to exit Saudi and I have reached a country of Aman, a country of safety and security. He has left Saudi where Aman is absent. He has left Saudi where he is under constant threat of being like the hundreds of other clerics who have been arrested and thrown in prison now for years and tortured and worse. Well, I'm not sure there's worse than torture, but anyway. The fact that a sheikh like Ahmad al-Mubayyad whether intentionally or not, whether he intended to say so or not, places all of us, every Muslim, before a juxtaposition that is undeniable and as clear as the sun, that in the lands of the Haramain, the lands of the birth of Islam, the lands of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, a cleric like himself is not safe. And where someone like Sheikh al-Mubayyad can find safety is in England or Britain at large. Now, this is the fate and the story of so many of us who have sought refuge in some Western country or another. And this irony and this paradox that so many of us find that to live our Islamic identity is precarious and dangerous, and indeed very threatening. And that so many of us, in order to feel aman, that critical word, aman, to feel safety, a sense of security, as relative as it might be, we have no choice but to leave the lands of Islam to seeking refuge in cultures that have never been Muslim and never embraced Islam. The paradox in this is not just astounding and endlessly painful. This has been the state of Muslims clearly throughout the 20th century and now into the 21st century. But the fact that a fairly mainstream sheikh like al-Mubayyad, who is as, in terms of their Islamic beliefs, Islamic practices, a sheikh that is not known for his political associations or his political involvements or his political opinions. In other words, a sheikh that has strove to remain as apolitical as possible. Even someone like al-Mubayyad does not feel safe in the lands of the Haramain and is forced to escape and then declare effectively, I have left the lands where Aman is absent, where safety and security is absent, to a land where Aman is present, safety and security is present. Now, what deepens our reflection and what calls upon us to even think deeper is that there is a backstory to what happened with Ahmad al-Mubayyad. And a backstory, again, that is full of ironies and meaning. Initially, Ahmad al-Mubayyad made a short video a while ago, a very moderate video. And in this video, he stated something to the effect that as a loyal Saudi subject, as a faithful Saudi subject, I feel that it is my duty and obligation to give a word of advice to the authorities. And effectively, he warns the authorities about the amount of transgressions and indiscretions committed by the youth in the wild and loud parties organized all over Saudi Arabia, and that these indiscretions in the land of the Prophet ﷺ is inappropriate. Shortly after posting this video, Ahmad al-Mubayyad makes another video in which he profusely apologizes for his first video and praises the leadership and says, I have been misunderstood, that my words were taken out of context. I did not mean to imply in any way, in whichever form or shape, any criticism of our great leadership, and that we in Saudi Arabia live in amn and aman, that we in Saudi Arabia live in great security and safety, and we are very grateful to the leadership for the stability and safety and security that we enjoy. Months go by, and then al-Mubayyad succeeds in escaping from Saudi and announcing his arrival in Britain and taking off the mask, so to speak. We are so accustomed to this. We are so accustomed. Our psychologies and our psyches have been acclimated and adapted to accepting the paradox that the land which were established where the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam prays to Allah and says, Allahumma aj'al hadha al-balada amina, make this a safe sanctuary, where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Muhammad, declared it a sanctuary until the end of days. This very land is only a sanctuary to those who are willing to live as mindless drones in complete and full submission to the political authorities that rule over Mecca and Medina. If you are willing to live as if livestock, without an opinion, without thought that could get you in trouble, without identity or personality, without expression that could possibly clash with the will of the political authorities, then safety and security exists for you. But as to any other human being who refuses or rejects the principle of total submission to political authority, any human being that rejects the principle of total submission to those in power, it is not a land of safety and security. And a country like Britain, in contrast, is a land of safety and security. If something inside of you as a Muslim is not deeply shaken by this fact, thoroughly at a moral level, shaken to the foundation by the fact that even, so to speak, the clergy of Islam are no longer safe in Mecca and Medina, and that in fact their only refuge are the countries that colonized and dominated and subordinated the Muslim world, the countries that continue to subordinate the Muslim world, but that your plane of safety is to surrender yourselves in the arms of those that subordinated the Muslim world, because there is no other alternative. This is a profound statement upon the condition, our condition as Muslims. What compounds the issue, and what even complicates this issue further, is that we are well aware that Saudi prisons are full of religious scholars. And we are well aware that European countries, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, host dozens and dozens of Muslim scholars who have escaped not just from Saudi, but escaped whichever Muslim country, and were forced to seek asylum and safety and shelter in countries that have no relationship with Islam other than a relationship of historical antipathy and historical hostility. But what is the deeper issue here? In a word, the normalization of cultures of authoritarianism and despotism. As scholars like Salman al-Auda sit indefinitely in prison, as scholars like Awad al-Qarni are sentenced to death, as scholars or clerics like al-Mubayyad are forced to escape to Britain to seek safety and shelter, Saudi announces initiative, the so-called Charter of Mecca. The Charter of Mecca, an event undertaken or taken under the auspices of the Muslim World League. The Muslim World League, of course, is headed by Muhammad al-Isa. Muhammad al-Isa is famous for his complete submission and subordination to the despotic authoritarian state in Saudi. In other words, Muhammad al-Isa is a thorough apologist for whatever the Saudi state says or wills or wishes. Muhammad al-Isa, acting upon the orders of the Saudi state, shook hands with the worst, most extreme Israelis who's been regularly involved with atrocities against Palestinians. That doesn't trouble him. As long as he gets his marching orders from the Saudi state, he implements and obeys blindly. Now, the Charter of Mecca and the events planned under the Charter of Mecca are rather fascinating, because this proclaimed charter, step number one, Muhammad al-Isa and the Muslim World League want to establish a precedent that only the religious authorities, only the scholars, only the religious figures that will be invited to partake in the Charter of Mecca are the legitimate orthodox scholars of Islam. Everyone else, not included, is, according to this effort, a heretic, a mubtada', outside the fold, an entirely marginal figure to true and orthodox Islam. But what are the principles anchored by the Charter of Mecca? And you discover that the Charter of Mecca doesn't address or even remotely come close to matters of human rights, justice, morality, ethics. The Charter of Mecca claims that the main problem confronting Muslims all around the world is extremism and terrorism. But according to the Charter of Mecca, who are the extremists and who are the terrorists? Well, according to the Charter of Mecca, it is those who indulge in political Islam. Once again, we come to this meaningless slogan that we've talked about so many times. But what does the Charter of Mecca want? Remarkably, the first principles of the Charter of Mecca is absolute, unmitigated, uncompromised loyalty to the state and an obligation to total and absolute obedience, unconditioned obedience to the state. If you do not thoroughly obey those in power, whether those in power, ironically, are Muslim or even non-Muslim. Remember that this is also al-Isa, and the Saudi government was very supportive of Trump. And its attitude towards right-wing politics in the West is that Muslims owe total and unmitigated and unconditional obedience. That opposing even something like the Islamic or the Muslim ban is political Islam and is evil. So you are commanded, as a good Muslim, not to be even involved in promoting an organization like CARE or promoting a candidate that runs for Congress, a Muslim candidate who's elected to Congress. All of that is political Islam. Or indeed opposing the Muslim ban. The ethic is an ethic of absolute statism, where in fact the state functionally becomes God. The state is possessed of a mysterious, nearly mystical knowledge of politics. You are told that politics is a plane that cannot be engaged in by the common folks or common people, because politics is replete with unknowns. It is as if the world of politics is the world of ghaib. In the same way that the Quran talks about the world of ghaib as belonging to Allah, in the statist paradigm, it is not Allah that is shrouded by the mysteries of ghaib. It is the state that is shrouded by the mysteries of ghaib. And because commoners do not have the capacity or ability to understand the mysteries of politics, then what is owed to the state is complete and unadulterated obedience. Your negotiation of your Islamic obligations is only in the space allowed for you by the state. The state is the one that will tell you what is the legitimate space in which to engage God, and in what way and in what means. Now, here's another irony. This elevation of the state to nearly a divine status, shrouded in ghaib and shrouded in mystery, sanctified as a sacred object that demands total, unmitigated, unadulterated commitment by its subjects, is of course, an earmark of fascist political theology. In the early 20th century, state worship was a political theology very aggressively advocated by a group of political philosophers that had effectively lost faith in all moral institutions. And so they put their entire trust in the authority and authoritativeness of the state. The state became the end all, the beginning and the end of morality, of ethics, of everything. And we know what the world experienced from the realm of totalitarianism and the world of fascism. But yet, in the 21st century, Muslims are reverting back to the statist theology that is indistinguishable from fascist political institutions and fascist political philosophy. Now, of course, all of this would not be possible. All of this would not be possible if Muslims themselves were not largely oblivious, largely illiterate, largely uncritical, largely unthinking Those that are organizing the Charter of Mecca know very well, that they're going to send out the invitations and that all types of Muslim figures that simply want the honors of being sanctified, approved of by the Emirat, by Saudi, by the Egyptian government. They want the factor of coolness. I get invitations from international bodies and international governments. I travel first class. I'm received as a guest of honor. I'm treated with a great deal of fanfare, and they will accept the invitation. Is it that they're just oblivious? No. There is a deeper illness in our psyche. And the deeper illness in our psyche is, my brothers and sisters, is that we are all authoritarians. And we are all despots. And we are all dictators. And that is why we are not offended to the core by the culture and the logic of dictatorship and authoritarianism. What do you mean we are all authoritarians? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws our attention in Surah Al-Baqarah a number of times to those that Allah describes as يَكْتُمُونَ الْكِتَابِ, those who conceal what is in the book. Now, of course, at the most superficial level, commentators say what Surah Al-Baqarah is referring to at least 3 different times about Kitman al-Kitab is that those who knew that the prophecy of Muhammad ﷺ was prophesied in the book, but would not admit to the fact and would deny the fact because they didn't want to acknowledge the truth. But at a deeper level, Allah is alerting us to a dynamic that authoritarian minds engage in all the time. A book, an open book, has possibilities of meaning. It authoritatively can support, back up, provide legitimacy to a number of potential meanings. That is the nature of texts. A text that excludes all meaning except one is a closed text. A text that triggers potentialities of meaning, that sets an energetic process and movement. A text, in other words, that inspires energies for accomplishment and achievement is an open text. It is much harder for the text to be open than closed. The truly brilliant text is a text that triggers a number of potentialities that are capable of evolving and progressing and growing to the greater fulfillment of humanity. The less brilliant text is a text that is closed upon itself. When you read a text and that book doesn't really inspire you, but it tells you what to do, and you follow what the book tells you, that is not a brilliant text. That is not a difficult text. That is not a text with great potentialities. It is black letter law. It is like a code. Yes, sir. I read, I understand, I submit, I salute, I obey, I enforce. No brilliance there. No genius. But then you are accusing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of being a dull author who is incapable of motivating intellectual and moral potentialities. The truly brilliant text is a text that inspires development and progress, that elevates its readers rather than suffocate the reader within a world of closed meaning. It liberates the reader within a universe of open meaning. Kitman al-kitab, to conceal the book, is when you conceal the potentialities of the text. And an entirely authoritarian move, because of your own limitations, subjective and otherwise, you say this book can only mean X. But the thing is that the authoritarian personality is of necessity, by necessity, one that is self-serving, but also one that is inevitably dishonest. Dishonest, it's in relationship to the text, and it's in relationship to itself. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأل الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين وسبحان الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى. The authoritarian personality, in order to streamline its vision of the world, and in order to streamline the potentialities of meaning, will necessarily engage in lying to others and lying to itself, will necessarily exclude potentialities within the text, not because the potentialities are not there, but because it will have to usurp the meaning of the text and insist on closing the meaning upon what it desires the meaning to be. But it cannot achieve that without a great deal of dishonesty and a great deal of double talk and a great deal of duplicity. All of us, or I should say the vast majority of us, because I don't know if this applies to converts, unless they deal with native or born Muslims and they become infected with the personality of authoritarianism and despotism. All of us feel more comfortable in this duplicity, where we declare principles, but we are uncomfortable with negotiating results that we cannot control beforehand. Look at our Islamic institutions everywhere, in the United States and Europe. How many Islamic centers do you know that actually engage in an honest-to-God process of elections and real choices? How many Islamic centers tolerate or understand the world of potential meanings? I'll tell you, in my experience with Islamic organizations, like in Mubayyad, I haven't found my support and my validation among Muslims. My aman was never among Muslims. My aman, sadly, tragically, where I have been, my worth has been validated and celebrated, my intellectual accomplishments praised, evaluated, engaged, sadly, was among non-Muslims. Why is that? We Muslims have gotten used to the art of denial, duplicity, and self-lies. I have been thrown out of more Islamic centers and Islamic organizations and Islamic camps than I care to remember. I have been excluded from more Islamic spaces than I ever care to remember. Not because they necessarily disagreed with what I'm saying, but because of simple, base emotions like jealousy, like simply an inability to engage, like an inability to negotiate the world of open meanings that through my intellectual endeavors I made possible through my interpretive activity. But you find that we Muslims, in our culture of despotism and authoritarianism, have grown thoroughly comfortable with this duplicity. We are far more comfortable, although we know the prohibitions, we know the haram from halal, stabbing people in the back, slandering opponents, announcing that they are mubtada', that they are unorthodox, that they are mutashayya', that they are not good Muslims, that they are. And we maximize this type of talk about the very people that we can't confront. And in principle, we will all get together and we will recite the Quranic verses about not committing ghaibah and not slandering your brother. We will do that. We will all recite the same verses and we will all nod our heads in affirmation when the principles are invoked. And then we turn around and engage in backstabbing and slander and backdealing and duplicity. That's the authoritarian personality. That's how authoritarianism works. That is the culture of authoritarianism. Look, the culture of authoritarianism makes you impressed for a lot of immigrants, so many immigrants, unable to engage the issue of race. Because as immigrants, and in a culture of despotism and authoritarianism, where you look always at those who subordinate you with googly eyes, with eyes that are impressed and dazzled, a culture where you gravitate to embracing whiteness, you don't know what to do with race. So we engage in duplicity. We will always declare that black are our brothers and sisters, but never invite them to our centers, never elect them to office, never talk about race in any serious way. And then, if you are the follower of Charter of Mecca, we will condemn critical race studies and condemn the very notion of engaging race as un-Islamic. Just recently, sadly, my son Sharif went through the typical classic duplicity of Muslim organizations. The authoritarian personality, the despotic personality par excellence. Something that I've encountered and experienced so many times. All of you know the way that a place like the Islamic Center of Southern California that loves to declare lofty principles blacklisted me just because they didn't like my speech. But in reality, what's at foundation here, again, is the culture of authoritarianism, simple jealousy and envy, and nothing more. With Sharif, my son, the MSA here at the University of Ohio State, Muslim Student Association, announces that it has elections for offices and says, people, we don't have enough people running for offices. We need offices to fill. Thinking that he has an Islamic duty, he volunteers to run for an office. But he promptly receives a letter saying, after a thorough review, and part of the duplicity, wherever you find a Muslim organization saying a thorough review, you know they're lying. We all know this. If we are honest with ourselves, we are all accustomed to this. After a thorough review, we determined that you're not qualified to run. Upon further investigation, they say, oh, you know, there were so many people that wanted to run for office. We had to be meticulous in reviewing the qualifications and meticulous in reviewing the paperwork. And as usual, it turns out, when the dust settles, that there were no numerous people running for office. It was one other person. And it is clear that they want this one other person elected. So it is clear that they're going to exclude any other nominees so that the person that they want to occupy the office will occupy the office. And I am sure that these kids, and I'm not mentioning this because this is an exception, I'm mentioning this because this is the rule. And if we are honest with ourselves, we will all admit that this is what we experience every day, all the time. And I'm sure that these kids, right after they write a letter lying, like the letter I received from the Islamic Center that says, oh, before when you mentioned how Sisi is evil, we had an immediate uproar. They know they're lying. But right after writing lies, lying, duplicity, dishonesty, they will turn around and go, Allahu Akbar, and pray. And it will never dawn on them that this is un-Islamic behavior, or that this is sinful, or that this is haram. That's what the culture of despotism does. The culture of despotism will force Imad al-Mubayyad to appear on TV praising the rulers, talking about Amn and Aman and the wonderful life they have in Saudi Arabia. But the minute he can, he will run away to a non-Muslim country and say with a straight face, I was lying. I was forced. I was compelled. Despotism is from shaitan. Dishonesty is from shaitan. Slander is from shaitan. When you stab people in the back, conspire against those that you cannot confront and engage, it's all from shaitan. Then if we all know this, because all of us know this, how can we embrace what is from shaitan every day of our life without blinking an eye, without pausing to think that the scholars who tell us to celebrate those invited to the Charter of Mecca are not simply engaging in harmless behavior. They are anchoring the culture of Satan among us. They are anchoring and affirming the culture of duplicity and lies. Final word. I've seen the amount of ghaibah and backstabbing and vicious, virulent, hateful attacks directed at Fazlur Rahman when he was alive. No Muslims dared to engage Fazlur Rahman face to face because they knew that he was a thoroughly knowledgeable man. But behind his back, accused him of everything on the face of the earth. I've seen the same with Muhammad Asad, rahmatullah alayh. The amount of people talking about, although never daring to confront him, never daring to engage him. Oh, he's a muttadi'. Oh, he's a Jew. Oh, he's not this. Oh, he's this. I've seen the number of hateful, virulent attacks even against someone like Roger Garoudi, who is imprisoned in France because of his free speech about the issue of the Holocaust. But I was there when Roger Garoudi was visiting the US, and all the Muslims who could not understand what Roger Garoudi was talking about and could not engage his philosophical mind all the disgusting, below the belt stuff that they heaped on the man, behind his back, of course. This is the despotic personality. And you know, and I know, we all suffer from it. This is the result of the hypocrisy and despotism that the Charter of Mecca wants to reaffirm amongst us. And this is Kitman al-Kitab. You are lying about God's book. You are concealing God's book. You are misrepresenting God's book because ultimately you're corrupting God's revelation. That is it. From the elections in the MSA, to the ban of the Islamic Center of Southern California, to the maligning of Muhammad Assad, to every slanderous campaign that has been waged against scholars of real knowledge and real integrity. اللهم اعف عنا اللهم اغفر لنا اللهم ارحمنا اللهم تب علينا واهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا يا علي عظيم. Allah forgive us, forgive our sins. Allah guide us towards the righteous path. Allah Ya Rabbal Alameen, aid us to be worthy of the moral worth of the Quran, your revelation, to never suppress the meaning of the revealed book, never suppress and conceal the meaning of your revelation, never be authoritarians that replace the divine with the mundane. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. اسألوا الله يستجب لكم وأقم الصلاة.